Over the past decade, the city building genre has grown so much that most new projects feel like mere variations on the same theme. You zone districts, build production chains, wait for progress bars to fill, and repeat. All Will Fall, developed by All Parts Connected and published by TinyBuild, breaks this familiar template. In this game, the world is completely flooded. There is almost no dry land left, and a small group of survivors must build a colony from the rusty remains of civilization directly above the endless ocean. Each new game starts with a surviving object: an abandoned oil rig, a half-sunken skyscraper, a floating tanker, or the remnants of a tropical island. Around this anchor, you construct scaffolding, walkways, and structures, gradually expanding the colony outward and upward. It sounds like a standard survival city builder, but the key difference is that All Will Fall features full physical simulation. Every building has weight, every beam has a load limit. If you place a heavy concrete smelter on the edge of a wooden platform without enough supports, the whole structure will collapse. It doesn't happen instantly. The game gives you several alarming seconds as the beams bend and creak before everything sinks to the bottom. Physics directly affects every building decision. Before placing a new module, you must consider: is there proper support underneath? Is the neighboring section overloaded? Will the connection hold? As if that weren't enough, the developers added a dynamic water level system. Depending on the scenario, the sea can constantly rise or fall. When the water recedes, new resource nodes and expansion areas are revealed. You can build supports on surfaces that were previously too deep. All Will Fall also features natural disasters. Tornadoes, storms, and anomalous rainfall can destroy hours of work if you haven't planned your construction stability in advance. As a result, you play with a fundamentally different level of responsibility for planning compared to most city building simulators. The resource model is intentionally simplified. The population needs food, water, entertainment, and supplies. There is no excessive luxury or long production chains with dozens of intermediate goods. This was done to shift the focus from resource micromanagement to structural and spatial management. Nevertheless, setting up proper food and water production is not trivial because space is limited and every expansion requires solid engineering justification. As the colony grows, new ways to gather resources unlock. Fishing, crane salvage, dismantling sunken ruins, and sending boats for distant resources. This is where the faction system comes into play. The population is divided into 3 groups with different functions and needs. Workers are the only ones who can dismantle map fragments and extract raw materials. Sailors operate boats and venture into the open ocean for resources that would otherwise be unreachable. Engineers advance the technology tree and work with heavy machinery, cranes, and complex mechanisms. Each faction has its own demands and loyalty meter, which you influence through responses to random events. The political system is quite flexible. You can govern softly by satisfying most requests or rule harshly by limiting resources in exchange for higher productivity. Both approaches work, but both have consequences. The priority you give to each faction is directly determined by the map and scenario conditions. A flat, sprawling seascape requires a strong fleet of sailors, while building a tower on an oil rig makes engineers with their cranes critically important. The campaign consists of 8 scenarios. While they have formal unlock conditions, each is essentially an independent challenge with a unique starting situation and goals. The first scenario serves as a tutorial, gently introducing physics and production. From the second onward, the game no longer holds your hand. One scenario tasks you with building a city on a giant tanker's deck and then repairing its engines to sail across the ocean. Another completely removes the tech tree. All progress depends on trading with passing merchants. A third gives you a strict deadline to reinforce structures before a tornado arrives. Each of the 8 scenarios forces you to rethink your usual strategies, providing excellent variety. The tech tree resets with every new scenario, so campaign progress doesn't accumulate linearly but instead encourages you to explore branches you might have previously ignored. Random events appear in moderate numbers. Some bring threats, sudden storms, resource shortages, faction conflicts. Others offer opportunities, trade contacts, discoveries, or small bonuses. Most events aren't catastrophic, but they maintain the game's rhythm and prevent boredom during calmer periods. There is also a sandbox mode, however, it doesn't offer the usual genre comforts. You aren't given infinite resources or removed threats by default. Instead, you use a configurator to choose the map, set conditions such as constantly rising water, starting population, and resources. You can adjust parameters or create extremely difficult conditions. You can even disable negative events to enjoy a calmer building experience. The game also includes a map editor and Steam Workshop support, so the amount of content will grow significantly. Problems: unfortunately, the game has some noticeable issues. The biggest one is pathfinding. When the colony expands into multiple levels with complex, non-standard geometry, the AI of the inhabitants starts to struggle. Workers get stuck on stairs or take illogical routes. This is usually just annoying, but in critical moments it can cost you a large part of your construction. The second issue is the interface. It works well in the early hours, but in the late game, when you need to monitor the loyalty of 3 factions, balance food and water distribution, control structural load on dozens of elements, and react to random events, the screen becomes overloaded with information. The verticality of the maps adds difficulty. The camera angle doesn't always provide a good view. Thirdly, the inhabitants lack personality. There aren't many of them, each belongs to a faction with basic stats, but they have almost no individuality. While the loyalty and needs mechanics work well, the colonists remain abstract units rather than living characters. Technically, the game runs stably on PC with low CPU usage and good performance even on large bases. Graphics settings are sufficient and the interface supports scaling. Conclusion: All Will Fall takes a familiar colony survival formula and makes physical construction simulation its central element. This physics system fundamentally changes building, prioritization, and threat perception. With 8 varied scenarios, 3 factions, dynamic water levels, disasters, random events, and workshop support, the game has strong replayability. Despite pathfinding issues and a cluttered late-game interface, All Will Fall offers enough unpredictable situations to make city building feel fresh and exciting again. Pros: physics and the ocean create truly interesting building conditions. 8 scenarios equals 8 different strategies. Clear and engaging faction system, good visuals, and solid optimization. Cons: colonists get stuck in complex structures, late-game interface is overloaded, faceless colonists.